Bandai Namco is garbage, and I wish they weren't. This company has seen better days and had better days, but is now not producing any better days for the consumer whatsoever, let alone for people that used to buy their products way back when, if any of you guys are still alive and did that stuff. I know it seems like I'm talking to a Zoomer audience, but I'm going to inform you about this company, the modern takes they've done, and also what they did in the past so you guys have a better understanding of what's been happening in the present, and maybe even a future glimpse of how worse it's going to get. So we're going to split this into two about the past. We're going to talk about Namco, or we're going to talk about Bandai. We're going to split them in half so you guys know the differences between these two and how they merged into one in the mid-2000s. Old Namco was known for their arcade and fighting game classics. They had some of the best games you could play at the time in terms of arcade games. You had Pac-Man in the 80s, Galaga, and Dig Dug, dude. Who hates Dig Dug? Who could hate Dig Dug? If I showed you a picture of a little astronaut hazmat suit guy with the little blow-up thing, who could hate this guy, huh? Who could hate Pac-Man? Who hates Pac-Man? Do you? I don't. They were doing a very good job of producing arcade games year in and year out. They were dominating the arcade scene. That's probably their top three easily, up there with Midway as well. But they were destroying the arcade scene, making it so much easier to make video games and definitely booming based on that source. But they knew even then that wasn't enough to go with. So in the 90s, they made even more arcade games. But they're also trying to transition over to making console games. Time Crisis, Ridge Racer, Tekken, and Soul Edge all came out in the 90s. Two of those specifically being fighting games, something they weren't really well versed in at the time, but were learning as they made the games, taking inspiration from other fighting games and then trying to incorporate their own stuff later on. But they were doing phenomenal. I mean, it could have been way worse. Like, Midway did not have the best transition from being an arcade game company to just a console company compared to Namco. They probably made the best transition out of any company that was originally arcade games into proper console games on the larger scale of 3D fighting and 3D games in general. And then in the early 2000s, they end up merging with Bandai. So what happened with Bandai back then is that they were a toy company, one of the largest. They're like top 5 probably in the world, maybe top 10. I know they're probably like top 3 in Japan alone, but they're a pretty large company. They're responsible for making the Tamagotchi. That sold probably close to 100 million by itself, which is insane for a toy. That's insane for the Tamagotchi, especially for Bandai as a toy company. But they're basically the Japanese Hasbro or Fisher-Price. They also license famous anime. They'll probably see like Dragon Ball or One Piece or other stuff that have a toy line that was based around them instead of other companies out there. But they themselves also decided to get not necessarily out of the toy game. They basically want to do a side job, was starting to get into the video game industry. They knew that this was going to be a booming industry if it wasn't already, and go even further beyond, as Goku would say. So they decided to make their own game consoles. I'm only going to name 3. Usually these are the 3 major ones, but the Palladium, which was a mistake, the Apple Pippin, which was a mistake, and the Wonder Swan, which was actually okay. The Wonder Swan did the best out of these 3. The first 2 were a commercial disaster. They didn't sell very well. Those consoles just simply could not compete with the PlayStation and any other 90s consoles that was out during that period of time. The Wonder Swan, however, could have proper competition. It was a handheld console, so it was easier to compete, but it still didn't do the numbers that the Game Boy Color, or Game Boy Advance did. Not even close. So they tried to go out of their way, after doing this with the video game consoles and the absolute failure that these were, to try to merge with Sega. They thought if they could merge with a proper video game, not only developer, but publisher company, that they could actually make maybe a proper console or just proper games in general. But it failed. Apparently, it was supposedly based on work ethic differences, but I think it was more due to the falling revenue that was caused by not being able to sell their consoles properly, which also at the time caused their president of Bandai to resign because how much of a failure it was to merge properly. So in the 2000s, they decided to become a game publisher more than a game developer. If you notice in the Budokai series that in America, it was by Atari, but if you notice in Europe and Japan, Bandai was actually the publisher of those games. And those are some decent games. Give those a try. But now we get to the point of where we merge these two companies into one. Bandai Namco, Namco Bandai. It's weird. It's very complicated if you try to look up the naming scheme. I'm just going to simplify and say it was Bandai Namco. Now we get to the other part of where this company started to slowly but surely show a bit of dents in the armor here. A little bit of looseness in terms of their business practices and their ability to actually make a quality product. The PS3 and Xbox 360 era, or I like to call it the DLC era, because of how things were more focusing on trying to make alternate content after the fact than actually trying to establish it in the game. We have games like Tekken 6, Tekken Tag Tournament 2 that came out, Soulcalibur 4 and 5, which probably aren't the best installments in the series, let's be honest, and Dark Souls 1 and 2. But Dark Souls 1 and 2 was they were a publisher publisher. Obviously, From Software was the developer, so on the publishing front, it's not nearly as bad at this point. You could even argue that some of those PS3 and Xbox 360 games are actually decent games. But you can start like seeing DLC for Soulcalibur 4, like Yoda and Darth Vader being on different consoles, costing like 400 Microsoft points or $4.99 on PS3 might be a bit too much. You could argue that Dark Souls 2 had way too many DLCs, and the pricing of those DLCs might have been a bit too much, but I don't think it was nearly as egregious as it is now. But you can start seeing that this was becoming a modern trend for video game companies, whether they're a developer or a publisher, whatever finger in whatever pie they had in terms of the involvement of this video game industry, there was always going to be DLC. If they saw money signs, they were going to do it. Corporate greed is big, large, and a part of everywhere at this point. Doesn't matter what country it is, it's part of something. But now we get into the modern era. The modern era of Bandai Namco, where they say, screw it, we don't care, everything's going to be overpriced, everything is barely going to go on sale properly, and we're not going to reduce the regular price of the game to be at sale prices, despite a game being, 8 years old. And speaking of that, I'm going to mention 5 games. Originally, I was going to do 4, but I think I want to mention this game as well as part of the so-called modern era. It's more like the past 10 years, around there, the PS4 era onward. We're going to first start off with Tekken 7. If you go on Steam on Tekken 7, you can see that it's on sale right now. As of August 2nd, it's on sale. And it seems like it'll be the next 40 hours or so when I do this. But the issue isn't just that. It's the price of the game that is 8 years old on Steam. This game's actually 10 years old from the original arcade release. But these prices are absurd. An 8-year-old game should not be $40, especially since this game definitely also relies on online play, which is not very large based on certain Steam charts that you'll look at. And that doesn't necessarily dictate that they're playing online. That just says they're playing the game. Those comparisons aren't always 1-to-1 in terms of that ratio. But $40 for essentially an 8 to 10-year-old game is absurd. It should never be at that price. It should be $19.99 at best right now, especially since the sequel is already out. At least they're smart enough to at least put on sale sometimes. They do it for the Dark Souls games too, but they're overpriced as well. 10-year-old games should not be $40. I don't care who you are, that's ridiculous price, especially post-pandemic, especially when the price of games are actually going up and they're not getting better quality either. That's my issue. That's what inflation doesn't dictate. It doesn't dictate quality. Does milk really change in quality that much the past 20 years? Do you think milk is like a superfood now compared to what it was 20 years ago? How about gas? You think gas is a super energy compared to what it was 20 years ago? Consoles actually did technologically advance despite inflation, not because of inflation, especially when these consoles had static prices, not constantly changing every day because of share stockholders all the time. We're also going to look at the DLC. And look how much there is of this DLC. Constant season passes, which that's great that they're on sale, but they shouldn't even be this expensive. They should be nowhere near this price. Dude, you're telling me the price of a single character is $6? Why? Why? I know DLC comes after the game's release, but they should be nowhere near this price now. I should have complained more about Darth Vader and Yoda being $4.99, but it was one DLC character. It's different when you're starting to not only bump the price up of that, but have multiple characters. What, a dozen characters, if not more, of all this stuff in here? It's ridiculous. Do you want the game to sell? I mean, this game sold extremely well. This is the best-selling Tekken game of all time, but it was on multiple platforms. That's not really fair to Tekken 5 and 3, which are 2 and 3 on the list, and this is just the first example. We're not even post-pandemic yet, and we're already starting seeing signs of this is getting ridiculous. Nonetheless, about the balance of the game as well. But the next game I'll get into, why not, is its sequel, Tekken 8. Tekken 8 is an abomination to fighting games. Tekken 8 is when the developers and producers and whoever's involved, not just Bandai Namco, but that Michael guy, I can't remember the name of it, and Harada, just, we don't care anymore, we're millionaires, who cares? Bring in my self-inserts, bring in the characters I like, and don't balance the game whatsoever. Just double down on just pressing buttons. What is neutral? What is footsies? What is defense? Why sidestep when you could just block, right? Why sidestep when you could just get hit with a homing attack that has no business hitting you whatsoever? Expand my hurt box. How about you lessen your hitbox? How about that? But these prices are ridiculous. This game is over 8 years old at this point. I think the price should just stay at $30. And we're past the normal summer sales that Steam usually does, and it's down 50%. That means the game's not selling well. Usually when they drop to this price, it's because they're worried that they didn't make enough sales, or they're not going to make enough sales in the future. One of the two, or both at the same time. So now they have to rely on bumping down the price in order to get it done. Even this is a multi-platform game and people are not buying it up like Tekken 7. The graphics are not the problem with modern era. It's the fact that computers computers can't run it. The consoles can't run it properly. So many glitches and bugs, more than your local zoo collection. Like, it's ridiculous. And not only that, just overpricing games to this extent is always going to make sales go down. Outer Worlds just realized that too. When Microsoft saw Outer Worlds was going to be $80, nope, sorry. We're going to bump that down a bit because they realize it's moronic to be pricing things that high and not give the proper quality to. The price to quality ratio is bad right now, but at least you can play the demo. And we're also going to show the DLC as well, because the DLC is just as egregious as the original price of the game. For a character pass is insane. $30? I don't think so. Just for characters, right? Not new maps. There's the new map right there. You want to pay $5 for a map? Are you out of your mind? Remember when you could unlock things in a fighting game? That's one of the best parts of a fighting game that I don't think is talked enough to death, is being able to unlock the characters and stages in which you're fighting on. A sense of purpose and achievement in order to understand not just you're playing the game to get good, but to get more things out of the game than you originally thought was there. Do you think in 1997 when Tekken 3 released at arcades we were worried about all this other stuff, about DLC and stuff? No. Does the game play well? Does it feel good to get a hit off? Does it feel good to block? I think that's also underrated in fighting games, but that's a tale for another day. But this is egregious pricing. A character should not be $8 on a game that's already $60 just to get a character, not a new map. You do get story in Tekken 8. It's not that great, especially if you want to buy a character and the story's bad, then you're probably not going to like it anymore. And I say this about a fighting game because that's what fighting games are now. Mortal Kombat made it really big and famous that you have to have a good story mode now. A good single-player experience. Mortal Kombat X's sales prove that point. Hell, even the first Mortal Kombat reboot they did for the PS3 and Xbox 360 also proved that point. That's where fighting games were heading towards. Tekken 6 did it, for crying out loud. Not for the best, but it also did it. But man, I just miss being able to unlock things without having to rely on a payment in order to get it. I'm tired of these payment barriers. They're disgusting. But we go into another game. It seems like I'm rambling, but it's important to talk about these things because we used to have it good. It's not just nostalgia that people complain about now. That phase is over. We're complaining because it really is bad quality in comparison to the past of what you were able to do, what you were able to get for your dollar. But let's go on to another game. Another fighting game that sadly didn't really have much in terms of the competitive scene, and you shouldn't really be relying on the competitive scene nearly as much as Tekken 7 proved, but that was more as also social media influence in an era in which social media was really big. Tekken 6 was in the infancy of social media being big, but Tekken 7 was right dab in the middle of a big boom. Soulcalibur 6 is one of the most disappointing fighting games in the modern era. This thing did poor sales, didn't really have much marketing to it, despite having Geralt of Rivia and 2B as DLC characters. They couldn't sell this. Hey, you know what? You could try to put water with this game to a fish and he'll deny both. He won't even choose the water despite needing it because it came with Soulcalibur 6. That's how bad this game was in comparison, especially to Tekken 7. This game, I think, is still $60. I'll put the price of this game up. Do you think the DLCs should be priced this much? As you notice that it's not just the quality of the games that I'm concerned about, and the balancing, the patching, and trying to make things one way when it shouldn't be. Why would you even care about the gameplay, the story, whether it feels good to play, whether it feels bad to play, if you don't even get a chance to adequately buy the game at an appropriate price that's suitable for your needs? What is the point? Might as well just watch cutscenes at this point if you want to know, because there's no point of spending the $60 to $70 to $80 to $90 to $100, $110, $120 or so, especially when you add all the DLC, the special editions, the uber, super, duper, pooper, scooper. I don't care, man. Soulcalibur 6 is a tragedy. It's just terrible business practices by Bandai Namco. They do not care. We're going to move on to yet another game, Elden Ring. Now, Elden Ring sold way better. I think Elden Ring was more due so to being more casual friendly, and definitely because of From Software more than Bandai Namco. It's not like there isn't any issues with Elden Ring. The DLC is overpriced, and I don't think it's From Software that's causing that. I don't think it's the developers. My instinct is to believe that Bandai Namco is the reason why things are overpriced the way they are, especially determining when sales are happening as well. They just don't know what to price things at properly. They just want to try to do this weird middle ground. Even though we'll get less sales, we'll overprice stuff to make up for it. That's their mentality. What the hell are they thinking? I mean, you're a billion-dollar company. Who cares, right? You could lose millions for centuries and no one would care. That's what I'm saying. That's the problem. There's no significant impact even when you're losing money. How sad of a world we live in today. But my goodness, Elden Ring DLC was overpriced. Night Rain specifically. This was not worth the $40. Elden Ring was $60. Why is the DLC 2/3 of that? And Night Rain, as I've seen, was more like an arena boss battle game. What? Even if there's co-op, Just put co-op in the main game. You can patch it in. People have made mods for it. I did a Steam review of Elden Ring Night Rain, and based on what I saw, ain't worth it. Nope. Not only that, you want to pay $60 for Elden Ring and then pay $40 for Night Rain. You're out of your mind. No thank you, Bandai Namco. I'll pass. But the final game, the one that probably disappointed me the most. I had decent expectations for this game. I didn't really think it was going to end up as bad as it was, or as empty and shallow as it was. Dragon Ball Sparking Zero is definitely one of the more disappointing games of the 2020s. It had such high expectations coming off the greatness that was the Tenkaichi series, especially 2 and 3. Maybe not as much as Budokai Tenkaichi 1, but all 3 of them have banger openings. You gotta really give it to the intros of these games. But this game was just disappointing. I can't believe they dropped the ball so hard. It did so well the first month and fell off a cliff because there was a lack of content. And they wanted you to pay $70 for this game. And I'm telling you, as a person who has all the Steam achievements, all of them, I'll show them on the screen. I could have got those done even quicker than the time that I did them in, because I was just goofing around online playing Hercule for like 25 battles. Who cares when it's this bad? When it's not balanced? When there's a lack of what-if stories that this game was trying to produce as one of the main factors to buy, just like Tenkaichi 3 had. But there's not even that great of what-if battles. They're not very good. And the requirements first week were terrible. Other patches came in the same week because of how difficult it was. And how absurd it is. Vanish counter. Counter. Press a button, it's done. And don't get me started on the Sparking Zero DLC. Let's just bring new characters in, but no new maps. None. Zero. Nada. This was all planned, by the way. You could pre-purchase the pass before the game was even released. This was already planned to be this way, people. The Daima stuff. I mean, Shallot was probably pre-planned a long time ago, but they finally released it, and that was like one of the worst editions. Who cares about this mobile game? I don't know. Can we actually have good Dragon Ball characters? Can we actually have a continuation of Vegeta's story battle that actually goes into Dragon Ball Super? I guess being the Deuteragonist is not important enough in Dragon Ball Super. Who cares about what his position was in the Tournament of Power? Oh, wait, you mean SSGSS Evolved? No one cares. The DLC was overpriced, especially since it was just characters. Yeah, you got patches for the game, but the game died. But that was a travesty, especially compared to Xenoverse 2, which is still getting DLC. Look how old this game is, and it's still getting DLC. Better DLC than Sparking Zero, a game that came out in 2024. Oh my God, Bandai Namco's priorities are just all over the place. In conclusion, like this is a midterm paper, a semester paper. In conclusion, my final thoughts of this. Bandai Namco is just a disappointing company. I wish they weren't so trash. I wish they'd go back to the roots and understand what made their games so great, instead of constantly getting into corporate greed and all this other BS that no one really cares about. It's been complained to death about, and it's still gonna be complained until morale improves. Have a good one. Thanks for joining me. Like, subscribe, do all that nice stuff. More reviews and retrospectives on the way.